Hello, I'm Phil Lyons from the Soundproofing store, and we are back with another on-site installation video. Today we are in the beautiful Yorkshire countryside, as you can see behind me, and we are at the home of a local customer who, like a lot of people, is having a bit of an issue with working from home. So we are here to do some work on the floor of the home office. Nice little small room, office upstairs, lounge downstairs, and we've got a lot of noise between the working in the office, traveling down, disturbing the rest of the family, and also noise from the family traveling up, disturbing the work in the office while trying to have Zoom calls and everything else, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate with. So we are here to install our brand new product, which is the Reverso SoundMat, which is going to help to reduce both airborne noise like voices, television from traveling both up and down, but also reducing impact noise from moving furniture and things upstairs traveling downstairs. Now, before you go ahead and install any soundproofing, the first thing you really want to do is just have a real good look at the room. Get a good sense of what issues there might be, what problems you need to address, because you really want to solve those problems first, or have a good idea in your head of what needs to be done. So what we've done is the carpet's been pulled back so we can get a good look at the floor. And the first obvious thing is just the age of the floorboards down here. It's a very, very old house we're in. It was built in 1860 something, very, very old house. And these are period floorboards. So although the floor is actually reasonably flat, it's certainly not perfectly flat, but the main thing is that there's lots and lots of gaps. They're traditional plank floorboards and they're not very tightly fit together. So there's lots and lots of gaps between them, little bits of holes. Even some areas where someone in the past has cut away a bit of the floorboard to get access, they've replaced it, and it's not a very good fit. So the first thing we're going to really want to do is get some acoustic sealant and go around all the floorboards and run a bead down the seams between the boards and get it nice and sealed. Because what we have to remember is soundproofing is like waterproofing. Any small gaps that air can pass through, sound can pass through. So we want to make it as airtight as possible. Another couple of things to mention is we've got a radiator in here and we've got some holes for the pipes to run into the skirting board. They're going to be a bit of an issue, but also a couple of holes where some old pipes may have been, and they've now moved, but there's a big hole in the floorboards that needs to be sealed up. And finally, just although the room is pretty square, we do have this bay window at the back. So when we come to cutting the soundproofing, we're going to need to cut around that bay window shape, which is a little bit trickier. Now, one beauty with the Reverso SoundMat, and in fact all of the systems that the Soundproofing store supply, is that they're all relatively straightforward to install. Now, behind me you'll see Alex, who's installing the system today. Now, Alex is a friend of the homeowner. He's not a professional builder. He's not a professional soundproofing installer. He's just a DIYer with competent basic DIY skills. He said he'd come along today and have a go installing it. So I'm here to help with a little bit of step-by-step kind of instructions, but it's just being installed by a good DIYer. Now, a couple of points that should be mentioned really, because you've got to look at the soundproofing as a full picture. And there are a couple of things with this situation that maybe aren't perfect, but absolutely things that we can still work around. The first is that the customer whose house this is today, they want as little intrusion into their house, as little cutting into things and digging things up as possible. So we've opted today to not remove the skirting boards. So the soundproofing is just going to go up to the existing boards, which is fine. It's still going to get good results from that. But in a perfect world, if you want to get the best results, you'd take off the skirting board, soundproof right up to the walls, and then put the skirting boards back on top. Also, kind of linked with that, in a perfect world, we would also actually lift all the floorboards up, get access to the joists below, because between the floorboards upstairs and the ceiling downstairs, it's just a big hollow cavity. And the problem with that cavity is when sound gets inside it, it bounces around, echoes, and amplifies. It's what we call the drum effect. It's how a drum or an acoustic guitar works, and that's going to be adding to the problem. So what you really want to do is get some acoustic mineral wool insulation under the floorboards, between the joists, and that's going to stop the sound from being able to bounce around and resonate in there. But the customer today doesn't want us to cut the floorboards or lift them up. They want to keep the original period boards down here, which is understandable. So we're going to skip that step. That will have some minor effect on the overall sound reduction, but that's what the customer has chosen today. So we're going to just install the soundproofing on top of the existing boards. We're not going to lift anything up. The other thing just to mention is the ceiling downstairs. Again, a very old property, so it's got a traditional lath and plaster ceiling, which are okay. They're quite heavy, so they add a reasonable amount of mass, but there's no resilience there to absorb vibration. It's certainly not going to perform as well as a modern plasterboard suspended ceiling. But these are all things just to consider when weighing up the full picture of the soundproofing. Now, when choosing your soundproofing solution, there is a couple of things to think about and weigh up. As I said earlier, in this situation, we want to reduce both airborne sound and impact vibration. Now, to reduce airborne sound, we need a system that's very heavy and adds a lot of mass to the floor to create a barrier which blocks the sound from passing through it. But we also want to reduce impact on the floor above from traveling down. And for that, you need resilience. So the system has to have some layer of soft cushioning, which basically will compress underfoot, cushion that footfall and spring back again. So the system needs to do both of those things. But an important factor is that this is a domestic home. It's not an office, it's not a building site. And so for a lot of people, a big concern is floor heights. We don't want to install soundproofing in this room, which is really thick, which is then going to give you a big step into the next room. So it has to be something that's relatively thin. And finally, a big one was that although there was carpet installed here before, the customer finally wanted to install a laminate floor. So we need a system that is stable, and the laminate floor isn't going to break up on the joins. So we've opted for our brand new Reverso SoundMat. This is a product we developed quite recently. First of all, it's very heavy. It weighs around 18 kilograms per meter square. So although I can pick it up on my own, I can certainly feel a lot of weight. And it's made up of 3 layers. It's got a mass-loaded vinyl, which adds a lot of mass and density to the floor, reduces airborne sound. It's got this layer of closed cell foam in the middle, which is what adds that cushioning and resilience to the floor to absorb the impact. And finally, it's got a 6mm cement fiberboard. This again adds mass. It's very heavy and dense, but it's also very stable. And the idea of that stability is it means you can install any harder floor finish on top. So vinyls, laminates, tiles, engineered woods, anything like that can actually go straight on top. Whereas if you were to install something like our SoundMat, which is softer, you'd need to overboard to make it more stable. And that then increases your height. So with this product, the beauty is it can be installed either way around, depending on your floor finish. So if we were installing carpet today, we'd install it this way, where it's softer, it's more cushioning, feels like an underlay. But because we're installing laminates, we install it this way around, and it's nice and stable for that floor finish. So the first step is getting those holes and gaps sealed up. And the important thing is we don't want to use a standard cork or mastic or expanding foam or anything like that. We are using an acoustic sealant. And the beauty with acoustic sealant is it's a little bit more dense. It can be painted over and plastered over, but the important thing is it remains permanently flexible, which means even after it's fully cured, even years after it's been installed, it keeps that elasticity, which means when you're then walking on the floor and you've got some movement or the expansion and contraction of materials over time, the sealant isn't going to break and then create another gap again. It's going to stay elastic and keep that seal for a long, long time. So the worst of the gaps and the seams on the floorboards have all been sealed up. What I want to do at this point is show you the edging detail. Now, there's 2 different methods of doing the edge, depending on whether you're installing hard side up or soft side up, which again depends on the floor finish that you're doing. Now, in this case today, because we've got a laminate floor going down, we're going to install it hard side up. But first, I just wanted to show you if you were to do it soft side up. So I've got the Reverso SoundMat down on the floor, and it's soft side up. Now that means you're going to be installing carpet on top of it, and this is going to act like an underlay. So when you install your carpet, you need your wooden gripper rods. So where you'd install your gripper rods, we're going to use a product called a carpet gripper riser. Now this is basically a soundproof strip made of similar materials to what's in the Reverso SoundMat, and it's there to raise your gripper rod to the correct height and also add some soundproofing below it, so you've not got a weakness all around the edge of the room. So it's very simple. There's a squishy foam layer down one side and the mass loaded vinyl at the bottom, plywood at the top. You put your foam layer up against your skirting board, so you're not going rigid material up against your skirting. There's some resilience there. Your Reverso SoundMat then slides up against the gripper riser. And then what you do is when your carpet fitter comes to install the carpet, you'd put your standard carpet gripper rod on top of the riser. And then that allows the carpet to just grip over the top of the gripper rods and then slide down the back. Now today, because we're not installing carpet, we're going to be installing a hard floor. We don't need the gripper rod riser. What we're going to do instead is flip this over so it's hard, stable side up. And the problem with a hard floor is that if the hard layer of the floor and the hard laminate are touching the wall and the skirting board, when you create that impact on the floor, that vibration can travel from the floor straight into the skirting board and into the wall, and then all that impact vibration travels down your walls. So we want to separate the floor from the walls, and we do that using a deck perimeter strip. This is basically a 5mm thick, soft, spongy foam. And what it does is by putting this all the way around the perimeter of the room, down at the bottom, you can install your hard layers up against it, which makes installation a lot easier than trying to leave an expansion gap. It still allows for some expansion if you need it, but it creates that resilience in between. So when you then create your impact vibration on the floor, it's going to go into the soft foam, which absorbs that vibration and stops it from traveling into the wall. So all we're going to do is lay it down all the way around, just like that. And then your flooring butts up against it. You then install your laminate floor or whatever floor finish you're putting on top of it. Fold this down and just trim off the excess. So you won't actually see this once it's all finished. It'll be trimmed off at the top of the floor, so it's all hidden away, but it's doing its job. So the last piece of the Reverso SoundMat is installed. A couple of things we just wanted to mention at this point. First of all, it is very important if you're installing laminates, tiles, vinyls, to make sure that your subfloor is nice and flat, because the soundproofing is obviously going to follow the shape of the subfloor. We were quite lucky today that even for an older property, it was relatively flat, but do check, and if you need to level your subfloor first, that is important to do. Secondly, you'll have seen when we were installing it, we weren't fixing the mats down in any way. Now you can adhere them down, that's not a problem, using a suitable floor adhesive, but actually they're so heavy and you're installing wall to wall, they're not really going to go anywhere. So actually you can just loose lay them, and that's what we've done today, and then they're not moving anywhere. The important thing is not to mechanically fix. You don't want to put any nails, any screws through the soundproofing down into the subfloor. That's going to completely reduce the benefit of having the soundproofing there. It's going to allow the vibration to travel down into the floor. So no mechanical fixings. Now, at this point, there's only a couple of things left to do. We're going to go around with the acoustic sealant again, just where we've got a couple of little gaps around the perimeter and between the boards, because as much as you try and butt them up perfectly against each other, you're always going to get some small gaps because the walls aren't perfectly parallel. No room is completely perfectly straight. So we're just going to fill the small little gaps in around the perimeter between the boards, and then we're going to tape the joins up so everything's all fully sealed and ready for the final floor to be installed on top. And as you can see around the perimeter, we've got that deck perimeter strip that we talked about all the way around the edge of the whole room, except for the door opening where we'll have the door threshold, but that's there. Couple of things, obviously in this case we've kept the skirting board where it is, so we're just going to keep the perimeter strip here for now. Once the final floor has been completely installed, you're just going to trim off the excess with a Stanley knife. If you were going to do the skirting board after, so you've removed the skirting board, installed the soundproofing, and now you're putting a new skirting board on, all you would do is you just install your final floor finish, fold the perimeter strip over, install the skirting board on top, and then trim off the perimeter strip at the front of the skirting board. And that's a much easier way of doing it. The only other thing to mention is you'll have seen that we installed them in a brick bond pattern. This is just basically because if you install them parallel, where you get the corner of 4 boards, you get a little bit of a gap. So just to minimize that, we slightly stagger the seams and install them in a brick bond pattern. Okay, so we've just finished sealing the Reverso SoundMats. We've done the perimeter and all the joins, so we're nice and airtight. The next step is we're going to use a plasterer style Scrim tape and tape all the joins. And then we're going to get out some tile adhesive. And the reason we're using the tile adhesive is just as the final stage, we're going to trowel it on every join between all the Reverso SoundMats, trowel it on and then smooth it off so everything is nice and smooth. The reason we do that is if you're going to use a floor finish like an LVT or a laminate where it's quite thin, you don't want any small differences in the joins of the mats showing through your floor finish. We want it to be as smooth as possible. So we're going to trowel it on, smooth it down, and that'll make your joins all perfect. So we're all wrapped up here in Yorkshire. The installation of our Reverso SoundMat is all done. It went very quick, very easily. The results that we've found so far are absolutely fantastic. Of course, in an internal property, you're never going to block out everything. Some sound is going to go out the doorway and so on. But that day-to-day noise that the homeowner was struggling with, the airborne sound traveling up, the impact sound traveling down, it's really made a huge noticeable difference already. Now, this product, the Reverso SoundMat, is obviously ideal in these kind of situations in a domestic property. It's perfect for flat refurbishments, people living in flats with noisy neighbours on the other side, and perfect for things like HMOs, where you've got multiple rooms, multiple dwellings. In terms of cost, for those who are interested, that was only a small room. It was around 2 meters by about 3 meters. Cost-wise, we were looking at just under £500 for all the materials, the installation accessories, VAT, delivery, all in, so not very costly at all. Of course, as always, if you've got noise problems at home, whether it's ceilings, whether it's walls, whether it's floors, you want to get it right, speak to an expert, pick up the phone and give us a call, or visit us at www.soundproofingstore.co.uk.